before I start. The first is that this project is part of an attempt of mine to think about esotericism in literature. So the term esotericism kind of crops up every once in a while. The second disclaimer is that I am unable to pronounce the word Bebuquin, just unable. So I apologize in advance for my Hebrew accent. I'm just going to say Bebuquin. So all of our French speakers here, I duly apologize. Carl Einstein's 1912 novel, Bebuquin, Bebuquin oder die Dilettanten des Wunders, is a strange and remarkable feat. Its plot is barely recognizable, and it offers very little in terms of description and character development. Bebuquin, in other words, is not a novel in any traditional sense of the word, and yet it is considered one of the highlights of Expressionist prose. To the degree that this novel has a plot at all, then it tells a story of Bebuquin, the protagonist of the novel, and a few of his friends and acquaintances who are searching for a miracle, right? And we can already tell that from the title of the novel. In the most general terms, therefore, the story of Bebuquin is a quest, an epic search for a fantastic and life-altering destination. It is, I will suggest, a quest for a new beginning in the most fundamental way imaginable. More radically still, the story of Bebuquin's heroic quest for a new beginning also calls for a new understanding of art and literature. In this novel, literature is not an aesthetic undertaking, or not primarily an aesthetic undertaking, but is more like magic. Literature tries to conjure, to make up a new reality, a totally new reality, by the power of words alone. Now, to fully appreciate the sheer audacity of this text, the quest and its magical language, it is necessary to shortly reflect on the problem of newness in its radical form. And the new, of course, appears in our lives in many ways. My phone, one can say, is new. The fact that we're holding a conference per Zoom is something quite new. But in a fundamental way, nothing is fully and truly new, right? Ask a historian, or better still, try to surprise a historian. Some of my best friends are historians and they make terrible conversation. You will immediately discover that everything has some kind of precedent. Nothing comes of nothing. The first novel, the first steam engine, well, the first film. Take, for example, Windows software. It is a life-altering invention. Some of us remember life without it. But Bill Gates did not invent it. He did not invent Windows. He merely stole it from Apple. And Apple did not invent it either, right? They stole it from Xerox, and Xerox did not invent it either. It was based on research done at Stanford. The story goes on, and I think you get the message. The new is always mired by circumstances that help it become possible. There are always precedents. The sad fact of the matter is that we're always already thrown into facticity, into reality that is already there. The question of Bebuquin, and to degree, and I think Vivian noted this already, the question of the modernist tradition is a paradoxical one. How can we do something that never was? How can we start over completely? How do we free ourselves from what is already there? Bebuquin's answer is double. He says, art and death. Art and death. The novel hopes can conjure the new in the radical form. The notion of art suggests that the miracle of which Bebuquin and the others in the novel seek is not something given, which needs to be discovered, but something tentative or potential that needs to be created. It is new. The German word Kunst, of course, holds this relationship still in view. The Kunstlich is both the artistic and the artificial. And in any case, it is something to be made. The characters of the novel search for the ultimate creation. As Bebuquin puts it himself at the very beginning of the novel, I quote from the very beginning, this is how the novel opens, so you have an appreciation of the kind of the language, the prose. This is what he says: I don't want to be a copy, no influence. I want myself. I want something unique for my own soul, something individual. Even if it is only holes in the private air, I can't start anything with things. One thing involves other things. It stays in flux, and the infinity of a point is a horror. Befitting a textbook on esotericism, esoteric thinking, or magic, the thing that Bebuquin seeks is, in fact, a non-thing. It is not made of things. It is not conditioned by things. It is something beyond thingness that evolves out of nothing. The notion of materiality itself is subverted here, and it subverts our way through which we think about the real. And still, like any modern artwork, or many of them at least, and like most esoteric ideas, this something is of the self. What Bebuquin seeks is a product of human spiritual existence in its purest form. It can also be understood as an ultimate artwork, which entails recreation of the self into a non-thing. It is the creation of spiritual freedom in a complete sense. As we shall see shortly, the ultimate expression of this fundamental kind of work of art involves the death of the self, or at least some form of death. The self in the novel enjoys a powerful descriptions. After Bebuquin introduces himself in the words that I just quoted, he is asked if he does not want to engage in applied sciences. Angrily, he shouts, "I'm a mirror, a motionless puddle glittering with reflected glass light. But has a mirror ever mirrored itself?" End of quote. The self, he effectively says, is like a mirror that wants to reflect itself. Elsewhere in the novel, the self is described as a curtain that is torn up. This happens in the 3rd chapter, in which one of the most spectacular characters of the novel, named Nebuchadnezzar speaks in the first person singular. In the person, in order to explain some idea. And this is what I say: I confess that in this case, logic doesn't go far enough because each axiom contradicts the other. Think of this then. The proposition of causal thinking leads precisely to non-causal, yet nevertheless with green humility, I go for the main thing. I said to myself, boom, abandon yourself. Everything that is personal is unproductive. Be a curtain and tear yourself apart. Nag at yourself so long that you are something else. Be the curtain and the performance at the same time. The curtain, of course, is a notion rich with meaning. It denotes something hidden and hints at a potential unveiling. The idea of being a curtain and tearing oneself up relates to the problem of secrecy and echoes the idea that of the mirror mirroring itself that we discussed above. These paradoxical images, the mirror reflecting itself and the curtain that tears itself apart, reflects the desire to create an art which is not a thing nor influenced by thing, but rather in its creation, it is a creation of an object that is a non-thing, right, or a nothing. These images reflect, no less importantly, the desire of an individual to project oneself into a non-self. For as noted, the ultimate artwork that Bebuquin is aiming for involves himself. It is this artwork that really involves the transformation of the self, but the transformative artwork will take, of course, a miracle to execute. So it comes as little surprise, probably, that the miracle to which Einstein's novel keeps returning is one of the fundamental miracles in human imagination, namely the miracle of reincarnation. The characters of the novel keep thinking, discussing, talking, and even trying out death. One of the central characters in the novel, Boom, is in fact dead most of the novel. Also, Euphemia, the oft naked, massive circus performer whom Bebuquin meets at the opening of the novel, tries to experience death for herself. She, I quote, tries to break her neck. That's what the narrator says. And she does so in front of unsuspecting audience who have come to see her walk on the tightrope. She's a circus performance, right? So she's a circus. She walks on the tightrope. She tries to die, But she's unsuccessful. She is, the novel says, too dilettantish for such a spectacular undertaking. Euphemia survives the fall, and so we understand completely that she has failed in her quest. The novel tells us that she would later become a nun. The ultimate artwork, that is the creation of something that is a nothing and a transformation of the self into a no one, involves, well, dying. And on the one hand, the novel strongly suggests that death could be quite different than how we usually understand the term. It is neither irreversible or universal, as Boom exemplified, that dead can speak. And like Euphemia demonstrates, death is not for everybody. Here, death is not understood in its finality as the end of life, but rather the portal for something greater, maybe something new. Death, indeed, can be a miracle. And unlike what established religions would have us believe, death is something that the individual can undertake by their own volition. And this brings us back to the fundamental issue at stake at the novel. The quest that drives the novel, the miracle that motivates the plot, is nothing less than a quest for a new becoming. It is likewise a quest for overcoming dilettantish existence and radically transforming the self into something both foreign and intimate, and in any case, something radically new. While this undertaking is described throughout the novel, it is only at the very end that Bebuquin, the protagonist, appears to succeed. I'm jumping a little, making it a little bit shorter. At the very end of the novel describes the 3 days in which the protagonist, Bebuquin, lies willingly. He tries to die, right? He tries to die. This is what he does. And he does it so for 3 days. This indeed may signal that after 3 days, Bebuquin, like Jesus before him, finally succeeded in transforming himself to becoming something new. Let's consider the final words of the novel. I quote, "Towards the morning of after 3 days, he, Bebuquin, awoke, but was incapable of speaking and couldn't eat alone anymore. Just once, he looked coolly and said, 'Ouch.'" That's the end of the novel. This might indeed be a banal ending, right, in which the protagonist tears down the so-called fourth wall, announcing the end of the story in which he is a part. But the final word, the final aus, the final out, and the fact is that the word is actually uttered by the protagonist may also suggest another reading. Perhaps Bebuquin finally succeeds in drawing a curtain and tearing it up. It may express the mirror, mirroring itself, but nothing but itself. It may be indeed to reflect Bebuquin's release from the clutches of dilettantish existence, his ability to bring about his own transmutation, and his ability to become the ultimate work of art, a real self that is something new. The last word may be thus understood as a magic spell or something similar to a magic spell, the word that holds a promise of complete spiritual transformation, a reincarnation of the kind which mystics and sages have been imagining for as long as records exist. We will never know for sure. We can't. This is, and I'm summing up, because the central question in Bebuquin is typical to many esoteric texts and many other modernist texts. How can one imagine the otherworldly experience? Here, a radically new experience, which is created by a single individual through his or her own volition. The novel tells of a quest of historical magnitude to recreate oneself as something that has never been. It is therefore an existential quest. But Bebuquin's quest is also an artistic one. First, it is a search for a new kind of creation. Well, this is obvious. It is a new kind of literary project, but no less importantly, it asks about a representation of that which has never been, or put differently, the representation of the unimaginable, the totally new. The novel thus searches for a new kind of representation. This quest calls for a miracle. This is because any representation, and I'm sure we all get this, any representation is always a presentation of something that already exists. It is never new in itself. It is always an echo or a mirror or a curtain drawn over the is. So how can we imagine the description of the new, that is, of the completely new? Put simply, the new cannot be represented at all. And this is what Bebuquin tries to represent at the end of the novel, or so I at least try to read the text. Simply, the new cannot, I'm sorry. And so, whereas the novel and its plot and its character seek to describe the problem of the new and the quest undertaken to reach it, the ending is nothing, I think, or other than a stab at saying something new. In my reading, the novel ends not with silence, but with transcendence. It ends with a sign that informs that the main character has moved to an entirely new form of existence, which language cannot really represent. Here, the novel describes the transformation of individual who in act of creative salto mortalis recreated itself as new. So I'm repeating myself. I'm drawing to the end. For readers who are initiated with the art of expressionist prose, this may seem clear. The signs that incorporate the miracle are simply this one word that appears at the end of the novel. I will, to conclude, try to say it myself and hope that it still holds some magic. The word is house.